Welcome to Section 2.2 of the Foreclosure Prevention class, Building Relationships with Clients. Building relationships with clients. All client counsel relationships are built on trust. If nothing else, remember that. The initial interaction and first meeting can set the stage for a successful working relationship, and sound communication practices are key. And there are some things you really want to make sure you do in the initial stages when you're building trust, and we're going to go over that right now. Initial interaction. Client and counselor should discuss the following information: the client agreement, including the services the agency can provide. No fees, of course, are being charged for foreclosure counseling. And then the best ways to contact the counseling team. So you want to let them know what's the best way to reach you. Because if you don't, you know what will happen is they will just call you over and over and over and over every day, 2 or 3 times a day, etc. We've all been there. So one way to help mitigate that is if you let them know at that first meeting, whether you do that in a group session or if you do that face-to-face. And also have all your staff saying the same thing. Have them singing the same song, so to speak. So your intake or your triage person should be telling them this is the best way to contact us, so that when they meet with you, you know that you tell them again this is the best way to contact us. And that way it kind of, it's like the drip method, you know, it's constantly repeating in their head. So when it's time for them to contact you, they'll remember, okay, well, she said to email her because that's the best way to contact her, or she said that she takes, you know, don't call her on Fridays because they don't take appointments on Fridays, or whatever it is that's best for you. Make sure you communicate that with your client. Also, that client agreement form, I can't tell you how important that is. Because clients think we can move mountains, and sometimes it may seem like we do, but we cannot guarantee that. So we don't want to give the wrong expectation up front. So make sure that that client agreement is, you go over that in detail. You also want to discuss counseling appointment schedules. You know, when they're supposed to come back for their next appointment, how often that is, that sort of thing. Maintain copies of your documentation received, so they should keep a copy as well as giving you a copy, because heaven forbid you have a fire at your agency and everything gets burnt down and you're not paperless. Then you want to make sure that you have that they have a backup. Or let's say you are paperless but your system locks up and you can't access that information. Any number of things can happen, so make sure they keep a copy of everything they send you. And then, provide clients with copies along with the folder to keep this documentation, as well as a business card. And if you don't have a business card, just put it on one of the documents that you give them, your contact information, your email, your telephone number, your extension, however is the best way to reach you. Some tips just for increasing your client's comfort level. Counseling must be conducted in a private office with a door, and this is per HUD's guidelines. This is not us. This is not just a best practice. It is a best practice, but it is a requirement if you're a HUD counseling agency. So it has to be private. It has to have a door. Does it have to be in your agency's office? No. No, it doesn't. It can be at a library. It can be at another third-party location, as long as you have a private space. Include in agency communication that child care is not provided if that's the case for your agency. So make sure they know. No, sometimes they'll bring their children anyway, but at least you tried. Know the community you serve and dress appropriately. Now that may seem kind of odd to add in a way of increasing your client's comfort level, but think of it this way. If you're in a community of, let's say, Amish people, for example. I recently lived in an area where there were Amish people. Amish people are very modest dressed people. So you wouldn't want to be dressed with a low, you know, showing too much skin. It's probably the nice PC way to say it. And you wouldn't want to do that anyway, but especially in front of Amish people. You want to be conscious of language and culture. Certain hand gestures in the United States mean one thing, while in another culture it may mean something completely different. So it's very important to get to know the community that you serve, because there may be these idiosyncrasies that exist, and you want to make sure that you don't do something to offend your client or put them off and make them not trust you. Communicating with your client. So every time you communicate with a client, that's an opportunity to increase trust. Every time. Every time you do what you say you're going to do, you're increasing trust. If you have on your voicemail that you're going to return phone calls 3 times a day at this time, that time, and the next time, and you do that, you're increasing trust. Now, by the same token, a lack of communication decreases trust. So anytime you say you're going to do it and you don't, it's like it's taken away. It's taken away. Ensure that the client receives copies of all pertinent information, and make sure you give the client updates as appropriate. So if you do a weekly tickler where you're contacting the lender on behalf of your clients and you get an update on the file, let your client know. Call them up and say, hey, I just wanted to let you know I spoke to your lender. They're at this stage in the game. This is how much time we have left. Whatever information you were able to ascertain from that lender, do share with the client. And the benefit of that is not only are you building trust, but that client's probably not going to call you every day for the next couple days because they know you're going to stay in touch with them. So that's a really good way of building trust with your client, is doing what you say you're going to do, especially with communicating. Every communication contains both information and service. So ensure that clients are given the information that is requested and within a reasonable amount of time. That's very important. You shouldn't go 2-3 months without contacting a client. Be prepared to give clients alternative options if they're dissatisfied with services. So let's say, everybody is not going to be happy with everybody. So you may have a personality conflict with one of your clients. That's okay. Let them know that there are alternatives. They can work with someone else in your office, if that is the case, or they can work with another agency if there's no one else in the office they can work with. So please make sure you let them know if you can tell. You can tell when they're not happy, or especially ones who really aren't happy because they complain. So when they complain, if after speaking with your manager they're still, you're not able to service them, go ahead and refer them out or refer them to another counselor. Because at the end of the day, our goal as counselors are to save their homes. And we're not saving their home if they're not hearing us, if they're not trusting us. Does that make sense? So one thing I want you to think about with this lesson is, what are the cultural influences in your community? Think about the people that you serve. What's your demographic? And find out what are things that are unique to their culture. That's the end of section 2.2. We're done. Thanks.